So good evening and welcome here to the Cruising Yacht Club of Australia for the official race briefing for the 35th running of the Noakes Sydney Gold Coast Yacht Race. My name is Paul Billingham. I'm the Commodore of the club. This evening we've got a number of speakers to walk you through how the race is going to unfold. Shortly I'll hand over to Gabrielle Woodhouse from the Bureau to talk about the weather. David Jordan, who's the chairman of our race committee, will talk about the sailing instructions and also deal with any outstanding paperwork issues. David Kellett, who as ever runs our radio relay vessel, will talk about the communications protocols. Then I'll introduce Ray McMahon, the Commodore of the Southport Yacht Club. Where's Ray gone? He was here. There he is. Sorry, couldn't see if I'm looking. To talk about the welcome you'll receive. And then obviously we'll finish up with some final notes. Should take about 3/4 of an hour all up, and obviously subject to any questions. We have this year the largest fleet we've had for about a decade. 76 boats are expected to turn up on the start line on Saturday, which is fantastic, and we really do appreciate your support as skippers, owners and crews to continue to make this event grow. And it's obviously a very important year for this club in its Blue Water Series as we celebrate our 75th anniversary as a club, and of course at the end of the year the 75th Sydney Hobart race. Also want to thank Sean, who I saw coming in earlier, and Noakes. Where are you, Sean? Somewhere? At the back there. Sean's obviously sailing on Naval Group. You are skippering it this year, Sean. Fantastic. So it's great to see a sponsor sailing in his own race. And the support of Noakes is really, really important. It's the second year of their sponsorship and support of this particular race. In terms of looking back to last year, we obviously had, for the first time, we started to experiment with the footage and the way that we covered the race. We had drone footage at the start and at the end. And we were able to show for the first time the drama of the race start, but also the tenseness of the Supermaxes trying to finish, right through to Bruce and Chutzpah coming through for overall. This year we're trying to lift that coverage to another level, and we'll have the race start live streamed through the race website with commentary by Olivia Price and Warwick Rooklin. So please let family, friends, neighbours and other interested parties know that they can actually be with you on the start line and going out through the heads, hopefully quickly. And it's all about obviously bringing what is a fantastic race to the public and getting that engagement that we get from the Hobart race and bringing it through to the Gold Coast race. So it's very important for us to keep that process going. Obviously these races take a lot of organisation and talking to that, I think Justine, we're as advanced as we've been for a long time in getting everything sorted and paperwork, which is fantastic, so thank you for that. But thank you to our wonderful sailing office here, our race committee, our sailing committee that work all year long to bring this race to life, our volunteers, obviously Ray and the Southport Yacht Club, and the media and press who cover it. It really is a big team effort. So, yeah, thank you. So let's kick off now and find out about the all-important weather. And Gabriel, I think this is over to you. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. So my name's Gabrielle Woodhouse. I'm one of the meteorologists in the Sydney office of the Bureau of Meteorology. And tonight I want to go through a few things. First of all, looking at the way that we forecast over the waters. So looking at the forecast terminology, different services, and then last of all going through the forecast conditions over the race. So one of the most important things is wind, and what we forecast is the wind speed or the strength and the direction that it comes from. And with this, we're looking at a mean or average wind speed at a height of 10 metres above the ground or the sea. Now, you're all very much aware of how the wind can fluctuate minute to minute, and the reason why we forecast that mean is because it's near impossible to be able to, be like, this is the exact wind speed at this particular minute. The thing to note with the wind and what we forecast with the wind on our forecast is that the wind gusts can be about 40% stronger than the mean wind speeds. And with that, there can also be squalls, and these will be identified within a forecast, and that'll be associated with, say, like strong southerly busters, thunderstorms, sometimes with showers as well. So it's an important thing to be wary of with our forecasts. And the other thing is, in terms of our direction, we do give it just as from 8 direction compass points. The next thing that we look at with our forecasts are the wind, waves and swell. So, sorry, a bit of a cold. The seas are what we call like the locally driven waves, and they can be quite chaotic, and swells are going to be generated from much more distant systems. They'll be much more organised. Now, both of these two combine to give us our significant wave heights. The significant wave height is the average third of the highest waves, which I know sounds a little bit unusual, but what it's trying to do is give you what typical waves you might be seeing when you're out on the water as these two different seas and swell combine. The important thing to note with that is that occasionally you'll see maximum wave heights that will be about double the height of the significant wave height. So these things are just good to know in the back of your mind. And with the wind, we do have a number of wind warnings. And these are important because obviously the stronger the wind, the more dangerous it can be. So typically along the New South Wales coast, we'll see strong and gale force wind warnings. Occasionally we will see storm force. Now the thing to note with these is that the storm force warnings have no bearing whatsoever to thunderstorms, and thunderstorms are going to be mentioned quite separately in our forecasts. And looking at our wind strength thresholds for these, we're looking at wind speeds of greater than 26 knots for our strong wind warnings, and gale for above 34 knots, and then storm force above 48, and hurricane force, which is much stronger again. With these, you'll see much higher wave heights the stronger the wind is. So looking at where to find our forecasts and how to use them. So when you're out on the water, there's a few ways of accessing our forecasts. So you can access it through satellite, VHF and HF radio, as well as over the internet. Now, over the HF radio, we have the warnings are broadcast every hour, and the forecasts are broadcast every 4 hours. VHF radio, is much closer to shore, and there's a number of bodies that produce that from the forecast that we issue. The last part of it is looking at the internet, where over the water, obviously you don't have a huge amount of data or access to it. So there is a website where we truncate what you can access on the Bureau's website down to just text, so it has no images, ads or anything like that. And that's what we call marine light. And that looks something like this. So it's quite simple, it's text, and you can download the information so you don't have to keep accessing it and using up data over the water. So what products do we actually produce? So within 60 nautical miles of the coastline, we produce coastal water forecasts. These go out to 4 days, and they're updated twice a day, but they can be updated at any time for significant wind changes or changes in wind strengths and for warnings. Now, warnings are issued every 6 hours when they're current. So looking along the New South Wales coast for the race, we've got a number of different closed waters and coastal waters that we can use. So what they look like is we have a weather situation that explains what kind of synoptic patterns are going to be influencing the weather over the water, and then we have forecast wind, waves, swell and weather, because these things are all going to drive how you operate on the water. Oops. The warnings for the coastal waters forecasts just state the coastal district. The details behind the timing of the warning, so whether we get up to say 30 knots or 40 knots, that'll be detailed within the actual coastal waters forecast. Outside of 60 nautical miles, we have what's called the high seas forecast. Now this forecast issues twice a day, and it only looks at the next 24 hours. As you can see, Met Area 10 covers quite a lot of water. So around southeastern Australia, it's handily called southeastern. Now these forecasts, like I said, they're issued twice a day. Warnings similar to the coastal waters forecasts, they're updated every 6 hours, and also whenever they need to be updated, whether it's to create a warning or to cancel a warning. So these look a little bit different to what you'd see on the coastal waters. They're all in this lovely font, which sometimes reminds me of way back when at uni, but it still has a very similar layout. So it looks at what warnings there are, what is the situation, what kind of synoptics are we seeing, and then it goes through the forecast. And it uses latitude and longitude and UTC timing, and can take a lot to plot and figure out what they're actually saying. So this is what one of the forecasts look like, and this is what the ocean wind warnings look like. So a similar thing, it'll give a description of what type of warning. Is it a gale wind? Is it a strong wind? Is it a hurricane wind? Very rare, but it can happen. Then it gives you a situation, the area that's affected by it, and then also the forecast for that area as well within that warning. The last way to access our data is through Meta. So this is more of a graphical representation, and I'm sure you guys have used this before. So in there we've got wind, seas, swell, weather, the list goes on, and you can zoom in and see all sorts of things. Now along the New South Wales coast, each of those little tiny grid cells is about 6 by 6 kilometres. So just bear that in mind when you are looking at the winds, particularly quite close to the coast itself. So moving on to what I think most of you are really interested in tonight, which is the weather for the upcoming race. So what I've got up here on the screen at the moment is a mean sea level pressure forecast for Saturday and Sunday. So the top left corner is 10 a.m. Saturday, top right is 10 p.m. Saturday, bottom left 10 a.m. Sunday, and bottom right 10 p.m. Sunday. Now what we can see on there is generally a ridge of high pressure across the north of New South Wales, and then a weak trough somewhere along the northern parts of the coast during Saturday and Sunday. Then on Sunday, we can see that there is a cold front that's going to start to approach Tasmania. And if I go on to Monday, so we're looking at 10 a.m. Monday and 10 p.m. Monday, that cold front moves across Tasmania and then across to the southern part of the Tasman Sea. But across the northern parts of our state, we're still looking at a high pressure ridge. So all of these factors are lining up to have been, not the greatest in the way of wind. With high pressure systems, you typically see much lighter winds. So looking at the race start itself, on Tuesday we'll have a little change that will move through. So the one that I was talking about being up on the sort of mid-north coast on Saturday, that'll move through during Friday for Sydney. So it means that for the race start itself, we'll be looking at west to southwesterly winds. And it looks as though they'll be just under 10 knots to start off with. But once we get outside the heads, it looks as though those winds will start to turn more southerly. So during the afternoon, we'll see those winds turn southerly, and we'll see generally fine conditions, although we might see the chance of a shower at times. So once we get into the evening on Saturday, we start to see those winds briefly getting up to about 10 to 15 knots. But inshore, we may see them remaining sort of west-southwesterly. So it's going to be a bit of a tricky one on that side of things. And this situation is going to continue for the next few days. So we'll have generally south to southwesterly winds, but overnight we'll see that land breeze start to develop. So if you're very, very close inshore, you may see sort of westerly winds, maybe 5, maybe 8 knots. But there will be an area just to the east of those winds where there'll be much calmer conditions. So it's just going to be one thing to watch out for the overnight conditions over this race. Generally, with these light winds, we're not going to see a huge amount of seas or swell action, but because we are maintaining a ridge across the state and sort of easterly winds across the Tasman Sea, it means that we'll have an easterly swell of below a metre for much of the race. So moving into Sunday, this day will probably be the day where we'll be less likely to see any shower activity, but generally speaking, we're looking at partly cloudy conditions and the slight chance of a shower throughout the race. We will see those winds remaining south to southwesterly in about 10 to 15 knots. And this story basically continues all the way into Sunday and Sunday evening. So depending on how far up the coast you get, you may start to see some southeasterly winds creeping in as well, but they are going to be relatively light. And overnight, again, we'll see those land breezes set up if you're very close inshore. Once we get into Monday, in the north, we'll still be having those southeast to southwesterly winds, but further south, so south of about Coffs Harbour, we'll see those winds be more west to northwesterly. So that's just one thing to be wary of. And with that, we will still see that easterly swell, and we will also have just a little bit of a southerly swell that's maybe about half a metre at times along the northern parts of the coast. So by Monday afternoon, up in the far northern parts of the coast and the southern parts of Queensland, we're looking at sort of east easterly winds. They may start to turn a little bit more northeasterly in the late afternoon and maybe get up to 10 to 15 knots, but at this stage it looks as though most of the winds will be at or around 10 knots in the north. In the south, it'll still also be around 10 knots, but it'll be another southerly that's going to be moving through going into Tuesday. So what we can see here for Monday night is some of those southerly winds starting to build for the Hunter and south, and up in the far north we still have those northeast to southeasterly winds of around 10 knots. Now, looking further ahead, I know this looks like a bit of fun up on the screen. There's a bit of uncertainty with how some of the models are dealing with some of the upper features in the atmosphere, and this is then causing differences in what our mean sea level pressure synoptic pattern will look like going into Tuesday and the rest of the week. So with that, we have a range of different scenarios that could play out. One is, so what I'm looking at on this screen is a couple of different models at 10 p.m. on Tuesday and the mean sea level pressure analysis, and underneath the green shading is to do with some precipitation. But what we have in the top two panels is essentially a ridge going across southeastern Australia, and we can see that a front has been moving across to New Zealand during the day on Tuesday. In the bottom two panels, that same front hasn't crossed the entire Tasman, and it has formed some kind of low pressure system over the Tasman Sea. Now, the differences between these two, the winds will still be somewhere from the south, but the strength of the winds will be quite different, and that is going to lead to very different sea states. So it's just going to be one to pay attention to over the next few days to see how things pan out and whether we start to come to some kind of consistency between these models. So just something to note. So it looks as though for most of Tuesday in the very far north, so we're looking at, light winds, so around 10 knots, southeast to southwesterly, but for the bulk of the coast, we're looking at it being about 15, maybe heading towards 20 knots at times for the coast. So with this, we will see significant wave heights creeping up, so we're getting up to about 1 to 1.5 metres, and we will still see that easterly and an easterly swell, and then we'll start to see a southerly swell developing as well. By Tuesday evening, you can see we've now got a little bit more colour on the map, so a little bit of wind strength. And in the south, we'll see those winds turning more southeasterly and getting up to sort of 20, maybe even 25 knots well offshore. In the north, we're looking at southeasterly winds, maybe swinging towards the southwest a little bit, but generally 10 to 15 knots. So with that, we'll see significant wave heights somewhere between 1 to 2 metres, and seas of about 1 to 1.5 metres. Going into Wednesday, so this is a very similar thing to what I was showing just before, but this is now looking at 10 p.m. on Wednesday. The same situation, we'll have, if the low over the Tasman becomes a thing and hangs around and we see that pressure gradient, we'll have those stronger winds, we'll have larger seas and significant wave heights. If the top two panels are more on the money, then we'll have sort of southeast to easterly winds, and they'll be much lighter, and we won't have as big a sea state with that kind of situation. So another one to watch out for. But generally, like I said, we're looking at sort of south to southeasterly winds around 15 knots, occasionally reaching up to 20 knots at times. Further ahead, a similar situation. We'll see how this pans out, and depending on what day you get up to the Gold Coast, we're still looking at the chance of a shower, and it's going to be fairly mild conditions. So as you can see, somewhere around the low 20s, slight chance of a shower, so really it's going to be quite lovely, I think, when you arrive up there. It doesn't matter what time of day it's going to be. But last but not least, I'm just going to have a quick go through some of the sea surface temperatures and currents, as well as the tide. So what I have up here at the moment is the sea surface temperature and the currents overlaid. So you can see the East Australia current and how it's a little bit stronger offshore. And if I just change it so that it shows just the currents, you can see that off the mid-north coast there, we've got a northerly current there, and it's about 2 metres per second in the strongest part of it. So something to be wary of. Last thing is tides. We're not looking at a huge tidal range, but we are looking at high tides being in the early hours of the morning and during the afternoon, low tide, mid-morning and in the middle of the night. So to summarise, we're looking at fairly settled race conditions. I'm imagining it will probably be relatively slow with those winds being quite light, but we are generally looking at winds being south to southwesterly to start off with and slowly turning east to southeasterly by the end of Sunday and into Monday. Overnight, we will see land breezes developing, and so we will see sort of westerly winds very close inshore, and just to the east of where those winds are, there may be an area of much calmer winds. And generally across the race, we're looking at partly cloudy skies and just a slight chance of a shower, and it has been relatively warm, and the water itself is also quite warm at this time of year. So along the coast, we have been seeing temperatures of around 20 to 21 in the north, and it was about 18 to 19 degrees off Sydney earlier today. So I just want to say thanks and best of luck, and I'll see you on Saturday.
It's always a bit depressing when you get to Thursday on this briefing. You could hear the murmurs. Just a reminder, at 8:30 Saturday morning, Gabriel will come back with a much better forecast for us. So please make sure you're there and hopefully get something optimistic. Next we turn to David Jordan, the chairman of our race committee, who's going to run us through the what to do and what not to do for the race in his usual very thorough style. So David, to the microphone, thank you.
Thanks, Commodore. You can hear me up the back quite okay? Excellent, thank you. Thank you all for your attendance. I'm conscious it's a briefing, so firstly I'll attempt to be brief. I'm conscious also that we're standing between you and further refreshments, so let's crack on. To matters of safety first, and a couple of things to draw to your attention. There have been a number of reports in the global offshore sailing community recently in respect of hypothermia. I'm conscious of Gabrielle's commentary around showers. It's very easy, even in benign conditions, to start to feel the effects of hypothermia. I note also Gabrielle's optimistic daytime temperature reports. I'm not sure we had nighttime there. It might be still quite cold. Please watch out for each other and do keep warm. Man overboard alarms. Please have a good understanding of the cause and effects of your own individual man overboard alarm systems. Does pushing one button cancel another? Does a change in GPS feed cause a drop in track on the plotter? Does the button need to be pressed for a particular amount of time? And what's your policy for cancelling an audible or visual man overboard alarm? And as an extension of the man overboard domain, please ensure you've practiced and briefed your man overboard recovery procedures, and also document that, please. Chart Oz 207 is now at edition 3 and outlines some refinements to the traffic arrangements and restricted areas on the approaches to Newcastle. Please make yourself familiar with those. Medical, an agency or entity coming to your assistance may well have their own medical reporting arrangements and response mechanisms. Nonetheless, we do have 2 doctors on call and available throughout the duration of the race. Yellow brick trackers have an alert function in the event there's an emergency on the boat, and all other methods of communication, sat phone, VHF, mobile, even activation VPERBs have been unsuccessful, or you're in doubt. You could try to communicate that you have an emergency situation by using the alert button on the bottom of the yellow brick tracker unit, which is activated easily under the flap and the red button, in case you haven't looked at it before. The screen, if you do take time to look, there's some notes in your grab bag which will cover this, but please do note that on the screen of the unit, when you unwrap it, it'll say that it's sending an alert, and the device will try and send an alert message. Don't assume that necessarily that message has been received. There's always satellite problems, for example. But if received, it'll tell us your position and that you've triggered an alert. If received, we can act on that. Please make yourselves familiar with the notice of race and sailing instructions. Both documents have a new look and feel in an effort to remove any repetitiveness and streamline content. Always good to have a spring clean. We'd welcome any feedback on that as a result of your immediate look and indeed post-race. But a couple of points to draw out. Drones are allowed. The rules and requirements for those have been derived from civil aviation. Please do note the exclusion zone in Sydney Harbour. There is one start line at Point Piper. It's given as much length as we can, and we'll work with the PRO on the day to get it as refined as we possibly can. Please note the geographic delineation for penalties, one regime for inshore, an area west of an imaginary line from Hornby Light extended through the eastern part of North Head, and offshore to the east of that imaginary line. Just a reminder also that boats shall be made available for spot checks at any time up until 12 hours after you have finished. Communications, much effort's been expended by the club to explore opportunities to ensure our communication framework remains optimal. There's many aspects to this, and there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes. And as such, we need to endure a little bit of trial and error as we go through. From a race committee perspective, please do join us on that journey. We'd welcome your contributions. More from David Kellett in a moment on communication specifically, but from a race committee perspective, I do note that there are two phone numbers, one in the notice of race and one in the sailing instructions relevant to contacting race control. The difference in the numbers is that one that we use for the notice of race has all the sat phone numbers stored in them. It doesn't matter which one you call, the primary one's listed there against the sailing manager. If in doubt though, please call any of us listed on your contact list. Also from a race committee perspective, the listening sked, which is via sat phone, is our burden. It's a few random calls to the fleet. We want to gain data and build confidence in our sat phone capability. We'll chase you. Don't worry if you haven't heard, we might not have called you. For the avoidance of any doubt for OCS and actually starting, the colloquial round the end rule applies. Some parish notices. Radio checks are outstanding for Bushranger, Carrera S, Hotspur, Jaffa, MGD Madjack and Thilmere. We need a sat phone check with Marguerite, please. Spot checks will be undertaken on board Mayfair, Carrera S, Dream, MGD Madjack, Pickle Juice, She's the Culprit, Excess Moment, Keone and Mako. Could the following please make a positive report to the sailing office immediately after this? Admiral, Grace O'Malley, Gunrunner, Imagination, Mistral, No Limit, Oriton Drumfire and Stampede. We still have a few requirements to address. Are there any questions in respect of race committee matters? Quite happy to take anything offline. Thank you very much. Thanks, Commodore.
Thanks, David, for a very brief but succinct summary. One of the important things that David mentioned is our radio relay vessel coverage, and we're fortunate each year, for many years now, to have the support of the Winning family through providing the boat JBW, state property and the crew on board. But the leader of the radio relay vessel team is, as ever, David Kellett. David will brief us on some of those radio procedures. David, thank you.
Thank you, Commodore. With the support of Marine Rescue New South Wales, we're going to utilise the VHF system throughout this race. We appreciate your support in this initiative to provide clearer comms. The race frequency will be VHF 6 with skeds conducted from Marine Rescue Headquarters. The sked times are in your sailing instructions. The 0505, 1305 and 2105. Should the VHF signal prove inadequate, John Woodford aboard JBW will conduct an HF sked on 4483 30 minutes after the published VHF sked times, i.e. 0535, 1335 and 2135. It'll be clear at the VHF sked as to whether the HF sked will be activated. Marine rescuers have done an incredible job up and down the coast, invested a lot of funds to make sure it works, and they've carried out a great deal of testing, and they're very confident that this system is going to work for us. In addition to JBW being out there with you, Dennis Doyle will be located at Cape Byron to assist with the HF signal from up there for the latter stages of the races, should it be required. Should you fail to come up on a sked, please contact race management on the phone numbers provided to report your position. As has been historical in the past, JBW has accepted calls for a few minutes later. Those few minutes expand and contract a little, but please call race control. But I can assure you they're probably not as lenient as the crew on JBW as to missing a sked. A continuous listening watch will be conducted on VHF 16 by Marine Rescue. This is the primary out of sked frequency to call on. JBW will be listening on 4483 as per the sailing instructions, but that is entirely a backup frequency. So VHF 16, your initial call through to Marine Rescue. Again, if 16 is a problem and you have a situation, please call race management on the phone. And of course, as in the SIs, from point danger to the finish, you'll utilise VHF 72, as we have done in the past. So I'm happy to take any questions, but appreciate your help with this, folks, and we'll see how we go. Yes, there's a question.
Just one. Let me say, alphabetically speaking, I'd rather be on Celestial than on Z. But the question is this: if VHF is not successful on the first occurrence, will you call the rest HF?
No.
So we'll go back to VHF and try again.
Yes.
Second question: would you anticipate having both HF and VHF on at the start of the sked so we can know where we're going, just in case?
We haven't contemplated that, but I think we've covered it with having the HF on 30 minutes later. So it'll be quite clear, I'm sure, whether it's going to work or not. We're going to know on the first sked pretty much, and we'll take it from there. But the Marine Rescue have done an enormous amount of testing on it, and they're quite confident that this is going to work. So we'll give it a try. It's a good advancement. One at the back. 60 miles. They've got their repeater antennas further up the coast where you're likely to be wide, up on top of mountains and so forth, so they're very confident that they're going to get that reach. If you're out that far, you better learn the haka. So. Thanks very much, folks. No more questions? Okay, talk to you on the skeds.
I thought he got through a speech there without cracking a joke, but no, it came in at the end there. Thanks, David. When you get to Southport, whatever day that might be, you're assured of a very warm welcome. And I was up there last year for a couple of days welcoming boats in with Ray and the team up there who are soon to be going 24/7. So to welcome us up there and to tell us what we to expect when we do get there, I'd like to welcome Ray McMahon, the Commodore of Southport Yacht Club, just to tell us a few things. Thanks, Ray.
Thanks, Paul. My name's Ray McMahon. I'm the very proud Commodore of the Southport Yacht Club. We're very lucky. We've got the party end of the race. It's the 35th running of this fabulous race, and thanks to Sean and Noakes for being part of it this year again. I'll get the important part out of the way straight away. A few of our boats went in and out of the seaway on the weekend, and be very, very cautious that as you arrive at the seaway, do not cut the corner on the southern end. It's quite shallow. So a few of the boats went through there on the weekend and it got down to 4 metres. So if you once you come up there and cross your finish line, please stay wide out, and then once you hit the lead lights, head on a further 50 or 80 metres before you start coming in, and come in slightly northern side of the leads, because the southern side is quite shallow. If you draw more than 4 metres in a low tide, we don't need any radio contact saying you have dilemmas. So other than that, it'll be a great time. We love having you there on the Gold Coast. Gabriel mentioned things like showers north of Coolangatta. That will not happen. It doesn't happen. I left the other day, it was 26 degrees and bright sunshine. We love having you up there. Once you arrive in the seaway, of course, those that have been before will realise it's the absolute best venue in the world to ever go to. We have our ribs to greet you. And for those that haven't been before and don't know the marina that well, don't panic. We have ribs greeting every boat as they come in, 24 hours a day, and we will guide you into the marina to make sure that it's quite easy for you upon arriving. Our club will be open 24 hours. Just in case you're a little bit parched and a little bit thirsty upon arrival, we'll make sure it's open for you 24 hours, the bar and the lovely hot food at the restaurant. So don't be afraid to arrive any time of night and enjoy yourselves up there. As I said, we love having you there. We look forward to having you up there. Don't worry about raincoats once you pass Coolangatta. It never rains in the Gold Coast. It's God's country. And look forward to all seeing you up there. We are doing a few renos at the moment. And they plan to be finished in the near future. I'm sure once you all arrive there, there'll be a few cranes and so on around. Perhaps Gunrunner might miss the cranes. But other than that, everyone else should be there when all the cranes are still happening, but it's all good. We'll make sure that there's 100% activity for you guys, and we look forward to seeing you up there in very, very, very near future. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ray. Right, some closing notes now. We need to have signing in, please, from another painkiller, Chutzpah and Bushranger. If their reps are here, please make sure you sign in to show that you were here before you leave the room, or you will be chased. A few reminders. The club's car park is being resurfaced here from the 6th of August. If your car is still here, it will be towed and you will be charged. So please ensure that all cars from yourselves, your crew, friends, families, or whatever, who are parts in the car park are gone by the 6th. That's very important. The official race gear, the Noakes Sydney Gold Coast Yacht Race official memorabilia has arrived. It's downstairs. Be available for sale here, and if my memory serves me right, there'll be something available up in Southport as well. So please take your chance to fit yourselves out. We're also keen to promote the Teakle Adelaide to Lincoln race. We have some representatives from that race at the back of the room, I think, hiding in the corner there. Really keen to see that race grow and develop, and we welcome you here to promote it this evening. As you see, you've got a fantastic audience. So please have a chat with the guys at the back from South Australia about that particular race and how you might be involved. And in the same vein, the Australian Yachting Championships take place in Hobart from the 3rd to the 5th of January, straight after the Rolex Sydney Hobart Yacht Race. we're keen to see great participation levels from that as well. Talking with Matt Allen earlier, it's going to have a sort of a passage race theme to it rather than too many windward lewards. There'll be a mixture. And of course the Royal Sydney Hobart Yacht Race goes towards the Division 1 title for that particular championships. The NOR will be coming out very shortly on the Australian Sailing website, or no doubt through the RYCT as well. And obviously everybody knows Matt. Any questions, do ask him. We're keen to see that race flourish. Other couple of shout outs for those of you who are looking to go to Hobart is the Southern Cross Cup, which is a new evolution, a teams event that we're running. And of course we have the Commodore's Trophy running as well for the first time with this race. How many teams do we have for that, Justine? 3, is it? 3 or 4. So we've got 4 teams of 3 which are entering the Commodore's Cup, which is a new evolution, which will be over 3 races. This race, the Cabbage Tree race, and the Sydney Hobart race. Teams of 3, I think one has to be under 1.3. Is it too late to enter that now? Too late to enter that now. No, we can still go. So anybody who's looking to put a team of 3 together from a club, a state, a city or whatever, please reach out to Justine and the sailing team. As I mentioned before, the final race briefing is at 8:30 on Saturday morning. That'll be hosted by Vice Commodore Noel Cornish, who'll be sailing with you north. And at this stage, we're envisaging having the trophy presentation on the 31st in Southport. Is that the Wednesday? If that's the 31st on the Wednesday. And Ray tells me the best time for presentations around about lunchtime. I don't know what he means by that. So that's our plan. Will obviously depend on the weather and when you get there. So that's it from me this evening. For those boats that have been called out to do certain activities, please make sure you do so and don't make the sailing office or the race committee chase you. It remains for me to wish you good luck. I will see you up there for the presentation. Thank you for this evening's attendance and do have a beer.